The Great Steppe, millenniums of events, hundreds of nomadic tribes and people. They lived, worked, made discoveries, conquered large tracts of lands, and left us some mysteries. To learn more about it, watch the project called Enigma of the Great Steppe. He thought over this order for more than one day. On the one hand, he wanted to consolidate his authority as a ruler, and on the other hand, he needed to celebrate victory over the enemies and inspire the people. Moreover, the messengers delivered the order of the ruler to all the tribes. It is a pride of the gods and ancestors, my fearless warriors, brave Scythians. You're tirelessly racing and poking with the eye. Destroy the enemy with your arrows. Your king commands every Scythian to come to him and bring the tip of an arrow. The one who disobeys the order is threatened with death. When the people fulfilled the imperial will, then all the collected tips were melted, and they made something unprecedented of metal. It was not a giant weapon, or an imposing statue of a deity or ruler. Scythians created a huge cauldron. For many years, it struck the imagination of everyone who saw it or heard about this miracle. Over time, the cauldron turned into a sacred relic, traces of which were lost in the steppes. The name of the Scythian king is preserved in world history as a legend about the Ariant's cauldron. Large cooking pot. Archaeologists also call it a cauldron, has long occupied a special place in the life of the nomad and in the world of his things. It can be found today, for example, in Kazakh or Kyrgyz yurt. It is an obligatory attribute of household items. A part of the rituals and folklore traditions of Turkic people are associated with it. It is familiar, native, and at the same time difficult, mysterious. Today we carefully look at the cauldron. How did the world know about Ariant and the sacred vessel? Why did the Scythian order to make the cauldron in particular? What did he want to find out by giving orders to his warriors? And what conclusions did the experts arrive at trying, at least hypothetically, to recreate the Ariant's bowl? In this area there is a copper vessel, size of which perhaps 6 times more vessel for mixing wine, which Pausians, son of Cleombrotus, ordered to devote to gods and put at Pontus' entrance. Whoever has not seen this vessel, I will describe it to him. It freely accommodates 600 amphoras, and this Scythian vessel's thickness is 6 fingers. Information about the exploits, customs, and manners of the early nomads reached us, thanks to the treatise of the father of history, Herodotus. He told the ancient world, including the Scythian tribes. Around 512 BC, it was they who successfully resisted the conquest of the famous Darius I from Achaemenid dynasty. The king of the kings has never been defeated. His army conquered many countries and people, but the meeting with the Scythians turned to the Persians as the first major military failure. In the writings of the ancient Greek historian, the name of one of the Scythian leaders, Ariant, was preserved. According to legend, every year in honor of the victory over Darius, the Scythians filled a huge cauldron with wine and watered the army and all the people in order to gain strength for new accomplishments. However, is that so that the Scythian masters could not mold the ritual bowl made of ordinary metal? Why did they need arrowheads?
Herodotus wrote that Ariant had a specific goal. He wanted to know the number of all his warriors. It turns out that it was almost the first official census of the population, conducted in a nomadic environment as much as 2,500 years ago. Once Russian researchers tried to figure out how huge Ariant's cauldron could be. Archaeologists know the weight of one arrowhead. It is about 4.5 grams. Although measures such as finger or amphora differed in various cities of Greece, it was still possible to calculate the approximate dimensions of the vessel.
It turned out that it was at least a half-storied house, and its arrow sacrificed it from 3.5 to 15 million Scythians.
Most historians refuse to believe it. And yet, why particular the cauldron? The scientists believe that the roots of a particular relationship to this item go to deep antiquity. In the north of Kazakhstan, during excavations, archaeologists discovered a vessel that was cast during the Bronze Age. That is, it is supposedly more than 1,000 years older than the Ariant's cauldron. Last year, the bronze vessel was found at Kara Tomar burial ground in the interment. This is the Sintashta culture. Its age is 4,000 years, i.e. this is the 2nd millennium BC. In the Sintashta culture, such finds have not been yet. We didn't even know that the Sintashta people knew how to do such unique things. The ancient robbers opened this grave and got it all. They left only the vessels, and this vessel was very lucky, in the sense that it was a treasure. It was buried under the floor of the bone chamber, and we found it completely by accident. It would seem that it is ordinary kitchen utensils. However, that is the cauldrons, even huge, richly decorated, which were also found by archaeologists in Scythian. This is the Almaty region. Burials belong to the era of early iron, the middle of the 1st millennium BC, and this is closer to the times of the Scythian king Ariant. Concentration of royal barrows is fixed and observed here. These are the barrows of very large sizes in which representatives of nomadic aristocracy and leaders were buried. Here in the territory of Scythian, a large number of copper cult attributes are concentrated. They include cauldrons, and they are different on a pallet, on 3 legs, zoomorphically decorated, generally without legs, without pallets, of different sizes, from 13 to 80 centimeters in height, with a diameter from 14 to 81 centimeters. It is a large concentration of smoker, sacrificial tables, and clearly they were cult attributes, and speaks to the fact that on the territory of Scythian, it was distinguished in this regard, perhaps as a certain religious, administrative, political center of the State Association of Sacs. According to various hypotheses, sacrificial animals were cooked in a large cooking pot. It was used in various communion ceremonies. They prepared intoxicating drinks. It was placed in the graves of special status people. From the Bronze Age, the large cooking pot was not only part of the material world of the early nomads, but also acted as a definite symbol. For example, the Ossetians, the descendants of the Alans, nomads of Scythian Sarmatian origin, retain the myth of heroes, Narts. It is worth plunging into one of Nart eposes, and it is as if the legends about the Ariant's cauldron come to life in front of you.
То же самое, если обратиться к эпосу, допустим, Нарский эпос, всем известный, да, там рассказывается о такая чаша есть Нартамон.
The same thing if we go back to the epos, let's say to all known Nart, It tells that it is the Nartamongo bowl. It appears on the one hand as a symbol of uniting the members around itself, because one of its functions was that the warriors who gathered around this bowl, they united around their leader.
It was not only the unifying principle, but also a kind of criterion that it led to reveal the real warrior. Anyone who spoke the truth about his military successes and exploits, then the bowl rose to his lips, and he could touch the bottom. And the one who did not speak the truth, it froze up. The intoxicating liquid rose and was not given to this liar. So on the one hand, it unites around these warriors who are loyal to their leader to the end. On the other hand, it reveals the true warrior of the present. And on the third hand, this intoxicating drink, this moisture inside it, did not appear anywhere. This cup was always full. In other words, it is a symbol of wealth and abundance.
Влага внутри нее, она никогда никуда не исчезала. Всегда эта чаша была полной. То есть это символ достатка, изобилия.
In the ancient world, and in our time, the crown, scepter, and orb were considered as the attributes of royal power. Moreover, in nomadic environment, according to experts, the cauldron appeared as a certain powerful symbol, and this was well manifested during the feast. The leader, an outstanding warrior, conquered his position by personal courage, luck in battle, and political talent. In order to consolidate the leadership position, he conducted sacrificial meals, feasts, fights, distributed trophies, and presented to the warriors.
Echoes of what Scythian beliefs today are guessed in the traditions of the two neighboring nations,
whose names glorified another huge cauldron in the steppes. And what did the tribes and descendants of the Turks spread throughout the world in their hearts? Carcass of sacrificial sheep placed in huge cauldron, miraculously filled it with meat in case sacrifice turned out to be pleasing to God. Well, in fact, cauldron was intended for water. It follows from the inscription of upper ornamental belt of cauldron itself. Tai Kazan, Kazan mountain with a weight of 2 tons and a diameter of almost 2.5 meters. This masterpiece of decorative and bronze casting art is much younger than the Ariant bowl, but spawned no fewer legends and was also cast in honor of military victories. At the end of the 14th century, the cauldron was created by order of the great Emir Timur, and it was installed in the mausoleum of Hoja Ahmed Yasawi. Aksak Timur was well aware of how respected the holy elder in the Turkic world and how important Kazan was for the nomads. To the south of Kazakhstan, many pilgrims flock to Turkestan to the present day. In a sense, the ritual bowl glorified such different people, the powerful commander and peaceful Sufi.
Once the Scythians felt reverence for Tabiti fireplace goddess. Tabiti meant warning, fiery. Tabiti embodied the idea of the sacred fire as an intermediary between the earthly and the heavenly worlds. The idea of the early nomads about the home fireplace, family and tribal community, and the unity of the entire Scythian tribe was associated with it.
An ancient prayer addressed to the fire has been preserved in Kazakh people. Ot ana, me ana, jarilika. Mother fire, Mother Ume, accept and bless. Anciently, the newlyweds were placed in a wedding yurt, Otau Ui. The groom's mother took burning coals from the family fireplace and, bringing them to the newlyweds' house, set fire under their cauldron. The meaning of the ritual is that you are a part of a large house. A small cauldron is a part of a large cauldron. For the neighbors of the Kazakhs, the Kyrgyz, the cauldron was also a symbol of the family. And this is a fireplace with a cauldron, which is the most important sacral element, absolutely inseparable with the yurt. In everyday life, they never carried a cauldron to the street, because the cauldron was such an element that gathered well-being for the family. It collected the so-called Kyrgyz kut. This is the blessing of God that came from the tunduk. In the center of the bottom is a cauldron, and the tunduk above it. In fact, these are two halves of one whole. A ball in which a tunduk is a virtual cauldron through which well-being flows. A cauldron is a real source that collects this well-being and holds for the whole family. Lighting a fire in the fireplace, the woman necessarily fed the fire with melted butter. She worshipped the spirit of fire, the spirit of the earth, thanked them for blessing and helping all the time. Thereby she was calling their favor. The nomadic warriors who replaced the Scythians in the Great Steppe after several centuries laid down a legend about the High Father of all Turks, Tengri, presented a large cauldron made of copper on an iron tripod to his Turk children. All the tribes ate from this Tengri cauldron, and no one was deprived. No one complained about the lack of food. These were glorious times. However, once the great breakup day came, people prepared and ate farewell food, and then Tengri cauldron scattered into billions of small pieces. Pieces of the upper and middle parts of the cauldron ascended to the sky, forming the constellation of the zodiac and the Milky Way. Lower part of Tengri cauldron, which has always been exposed to fire, smashed into billions of copper drops that fell into the heart of each Turk, and passing from father to son, treasured in heart of Turks keeping passionate love for their home and big Tengri cauldron. Hakas, Tuvans, Bashkirs, and other Turkic-speaking people have kept the tradition of honoring cauldron as a symbol of tribal unity. The cauldron of nomadic people is used even now, for example, among the Tuvinians. The cauldron is still used by the family encampment when preparing the food. The cauldron is used and was used, for example, during some public holidays or social religious prayers. In Bashkir folklore, the cauldron is very often found, and it is like a symbol of the sky, upturned symbol of sky. On Bashkir Sabantu, there is such a contest. One of the elements of the rituals, a small amount of milk is poured onto the bottom of the cauldron, and a coin is thrown there. A person has to get it, and there will be a prize for him. It is needed to get the coin with lips. And this is connected with mythology. There was water everywhere, and for the first time, a duck appeared on the water surface. The duck dived and took a piece of dry land from the bottom, and a small piece of land was laid out of it. And the symbolism was preserved in Sabantui. Contemporaries of King Ariant left more clues to the legend of the sacred vessel. What did scientists discover on Sacred Mountain? What is the legend associated with the city of the banks of the Volga? And who tried to find the bowl of the Scythian king? In Khakassia, on Boyari Ridge, which means the sacred mountain, rock drawings are preserved. The plot of the Boyar carving is based on the daily life of cattlemen of the 9th to the 3rd centuries BC, essentially contemporaries of King Ariant. This is the big Boyar carving, where a large number of dwellings images of the last centuries BC are presented at the late stage of Togar culture development of the Scythian period of the Minus-Sinsk basin. In addition to dwellings, there are also images of cauldrons. As well as on the small boyar carving, they are shown on the sides of the dwellings. Here is a dwelling, and the cauldrons are shown here. It is very interesting that some details are shown on these drawings. Handles are shown on top of the cauldron. On each handle, there are 3 small branches that are comparable to what they look like, what shape the handles of the cauldrons have. These are the handles that we have from archaeological monuments, collections of museums. Here is another cauldron of the same type. In some cases, the cauldrons are depicted on the rocks in a composition with people and anthropomorphic figures. People hold some tools in their hands with which they stir the food they cook in these cauldrons. There are more than 100 cauldrons in the collections of our museum today. These are mainly bronze cauldrons. They belong to the so-called Tagar archaeological culture that existed here, in the territory of the southern Yenisei in 8th to the 3rd centuries BC. Judging by the pictures that are on this carving, the cauldrons were used, at least large, for the preparation of ritual meals, because it shows how horses are thrown into these cauldrons. Apparently not horses, but fowls, or maybe pieces of mare's meat. Then there are handles, which are not even handles, but images of deer, horses, goats, and quite possibly, this may indicate what they cooked. This is the first primitive interpretation. And the second one is deeper. All the same, it says that the cauldron relates specifically to cult practices, since the works of the Scythian Siberian animal style were placed on it. For example, daggers, knives with heads of deer, moose, deer badges, which were placed in the graves and quite possibly served as some kind of pass to the other world. Kazan even gave the name of the city on the banks of the Volga. According to the legend, a certain prophetic old man advised people to build a settlement where a cauldron with water dug into the ground will boil by itself. The necessary encampment was determined where the Bulak River flows into the Kazanka. Today it is the capital of Tatarstan. According to another legend, the son of the Bulgarian Khan Gabdullah Altinbek, pursued by the Mongols, sought refuge in the steppes. He set up camp near the river and sent a servant for water, handing him a royal cauldron of gold. On the way, the precious bowl accidentally fell out and sank. Han saw a divine sign in that and ordered the city to be founded on these shores. In the 20th century, according to some information, a Nen Yerbia secret organization, which was supported by the leadership of the Third Reich, was looking for the Ariant bowl. Around the world, the National Socialists searched for the artifacts related to the most ancient occult secrets, the Art of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the Spear of Longinus. Money was allocated to search for the heritage of the ancient Hyperboreans and the mystical Shambhala. They say that Hitler spent more on all this than the Americans did to create an atom bomb. Nevertheless, the cauldron is a symbol of peace, as the poet Bakhit Kairbekov ponders over in the World of Nomad Encampment book. And just as the warring parties call for peace, denoting this treaty poetically, let's cut swords into plows, so the nomads' main weapon is arrows and spears, or rather their tips, melted into cauldrons, and in hard times cauldrons, in turn, regain the sharpness of arrows and spears. Perhaps therefore so little of these vessels survived, their ashes scattered across the battlefields. The Scythians cherished the bowl of King Ariant. The ruler who defeated the enemies was long gone, and the tribes continued to gather in the days of special events at the sacred cauldron, asking for blessing from above. The warriors were preparing for a new battle, and the civilians marveled at the creation of the hands of Scythian masters, and believed that as long as the sacred cauldron was with them, the people would be united and kept in heaven.